Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, Christe eleison, Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's approximately 3:20 in the afternoon on the East Coast, and it's a very sunny day in Georgia. I hope to get out into the sun maybe later on today, but I just wanted to do a quick follow-up to one of my early postings that I did concerning Kash Patel and the FBI. Evidently, within the last 90 minutes, there was a vote that was put up for him, and he was confirmed. He was confirmed at the vote of 51 to 49, which did not require the Vice President of the United States to go into have to break the tie. However, there were two Republican defections. One of them was Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, and the other one was from Susan Collins in Maine. Now, as an aside before I get into the confirmation, especially with Ms. Murkowski, a while back when she was up for re-election, she actually ran as a Republican and actually was defeated. So she took a slightly different tact. She then, she would not concede her Republican election, but again ran as an independent in the general. Won by some strange coincidence, won the general election as an independent, and then when she was being sworn back in, she redeclared her Republican bona fides. Certainly an act of political brinksmanship, but certainly one of those things that people will go in order to stay in power. Now, Ms. Collins has been somewhat of a different animal. She maintains some level of what I would say independent, but that's maybe in the character of people from Maine. They tend to be very independent people, which is fine. I certainly appreciate that. But the fact of the matter is, during the Kavanaugh hearings, I know she was being leaned on pretty heavily, and she did vote for confirmation for Kavanaugh. But the fact of the matter is that I think that if push comes to shove, she tends to just fly on the more liberal side. I would probably think that between her and Ms. Murkowski are really the last, if there's a title to be have, a Republican liberal. Those two would certainly have that. But, okay, we didn't need their vote, but we got Mr. Patel in. So, as I go now and look at this, first of all, I am amazed at the ferocity. And one of the things that, again, as an outsider, but I think that it's a pretty good adage, starting with our current president. If they really, really hate you, then you must really either get underneath their craw or you're doing something right. Because the fact of the matter is that, Washington used to pride itself on being this collegial, especially in the Senate. The Senate is this collegial body. It's called the smallest club in America. You only get 100 members in there. You don't even count the vice president. He's only there by virtue of the Constitution, but he's not really a member. He's only there to break, tie-breaking votes, but he's not a member of the club. He runs the club as being the presiding officer, and he is addressed as the president of the Senate, but he's not in the club per se. Well, the problem is that I was listening to Steve Bannon, and Steve had a very, very important point, is that other than the Senate being the upper part of the bicameral legislature that we have, right? It's also the Human Resources Department of the United States government. And that quote is Steve's, not mine, but it's actually quite fitting, because the fact of the matter is that under the advise and consent clause in the Constitution, the Senate is there to confirm presidential appointments. they are also there to confirm appointees to the Supreme Court. That's why in the Kavanaugh hearings got so heated, because now here was a real chance for the court to really to shift. Chief Justice Roberts would not consider himself to, he's kind of this independent ilk, although one of the reasons why he was chosen was because he was essentially a conservative. But now being the chief, as he's addressed within the court, among the court staff, he is the chief, and that's fine. I respect that. He is the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. He is effectively the head of not only the Supreme Court, but the entire federal judiciary. He submits their budgets. He advises on appointments, I'm sure. He's just not there with the other 8 justices deciding cases. Okay, they're getting stuff done. But the thing is that under the advice and consent, the hearings have gotten rather, and I did a specific series on that previously, but, even when Ketanji Jackson was being confirmed, she was treated with a much higher level of respect than Kavanaugh was. Now, to some extent, it's kind of like, well, replacing a liberal with a liberal, and especially if you're out of power, as the Republicans were, with Biden as president, that certainly is not going to help you to go into to hold up votes like that. So, as it was advised, the president, makes the appointment. The Senate goes through its confirmation process. She was confirmed. She was sworn in. And now she is the youngest justice on the Supreme Court. Amy Coney Barrett was in that position. Ketanji Jackson comes in. Now, who will be the next person on the high court? Maybe there's a discussion for another video. But understanding how important advice and consent is. Well, back in 1962, there was a great movie called that by itself, Advise and Consent. And it was produced by Otto Preminger, who was a premier Hollywood director and producer. I believe he did both functions. My understanding in Hollywood, the producer is the guy with the money and the director is the guy that tells everyone what to do, simply. But Preminger, I believe, did both. But if you look at this, now this is going to kind of seem like a who's who, and most of these people are probably dead. I know Burgess Meredith is, even, where is Peter Lawford? Peter Lawford's up there. Peter unfortunately passed away. Gene Tierney, Franchette Toney was actually the husband of Joan Crawford and was married to her for a while. And if you remember, there's a line in Mommy Dearest where the reason why Joan wanted to adopt the child so much is that she tried so many times with Toney, and unfortunately she had nothing but miscarriages. Inga Svensson plays this Washington socialite who is actually in love with the Senate Majority Leader, who is played by, where is he? Walter Pidgeon. There he is. Lou Ayres is a vice president of the United States. Franchone in this movie plays a president, but he's ailing. And Lou Ayres is the vice president, and of course, he's the presiding officer of the Senate. So I don't want to give too much of the story away, but it just shows that even back then, the scheming, the dealing, the double crossing sometimes, it happened back then. And this movie was made in 1962. So the fact of the matter is that Hollywood is a creature of habit, sometimes of bad habits, but unfortunately, it is what it is. So as we go and we move along, going back to Kash and what he's had to endure, and I say endure with a great deal of is that both? There we go. With both, I mean, this was a slide taking him earlier. This is him arriving at a confirmation hearing, not at the vote that took place today. But I mean, I look at that man and I'm just like, this is a guy on a mission. I'm sorry. Obviously the 2 armed police officers, and that's the other thing too, is that, in this movie, you'll see these conferees or proposed conferees coming into the Senate chamber or the hearing rooms, and, they're not surrounded by an entourage. I mean, this is a modern day occurrence because so often the special interest groups and the extremists really feel that it's their right to just invade the Capitol building. I mean, it was amazing that when my wife and I had to go, just as tourists, what we had to go through just to get inside the building. And yet sometimes these activists are able to get in there, disrupt a hearing, like what happened with Kavanaugh. They didn't even get the first two words out of Charles Grassley's mouth before, someone was either making a ruckus or, Cory Booker. Boy, that I hate to use that. I don't mean boy because he's an African-American male. That's not my intent. I'm just saying as an exclamation, I mean, he's just a piece of work. I mean, this guy really is dying to be president someday. And he ran for president. And you know what? His candidacy went nowhere. It's like his claim to fame was, I believe he was the mayor of Newark, New Jersey. He ran for the Senate in New Jersey, became a senator. Fine, all well and good. You're a member of the club. And, the way that he was grilling Kavanaugh on how many African Americans and people of color he was recruiting for his clerkship. And, Kavanaugh came back and said, here, I can produce a list. I can show you what I've done to help, bring these people in for clerks. And, at that point, Booker kind of had to back off because, basically Kavanaugh had called him. But in the case of Kash, I mean, I just look at that man. I mean, look into his eyes. I mean, you want to see a look of determination. Look into a man's eyes. They say when you look into a woman's eyes, you gaze into her soul. You look into a man's eyes, and that is a man on a mission. So, in terms of this whole confirmation process that he had to go through, well, the other thing that we saw is that today Mitch McConnell also went and announced that he was retiring from the Senate. However, he didn't say he was retiring from the Senate today. He's going to wait 2 more years until he can retire. I think Mitch is like 82 right now. And it's just kind of funny that, these people just will not retire. I mean, their attitude is that, that now granted, Mitch McConnell's legacy is that he has placed more conservative federal judges on the bench than perhaps any other Senate majority leader in the history of the Senate. He was intricately involved with the Federalist Society. I think part of the reason why President Trump was elected the first time was because he said, I will, choose judges only from the Federalist Society. They presented him with a list. Lo and behold, Kavanaugh was on that list. So was Amy Coney Barrett. So that was kind of his bona fides. And McConnell was the one to say, yeah, we're going to make that happen. But the problem and again, this is another thing that Washington has, okay, is that once they get entrenched in power, boy, you need dynamite to blow them out. And now, Mitch McConnell came from a relatively conservative state, the state of Kentucky. I'm sure he delivered for Kentucky. When the pork needed to be brought back to the home state, Mitch was there. I'm sure of it. And it's interesting now as they're going through the federal budget in terms of all this pork in terms of being able to do that. But that's kind of the unwritten bargain, right? You represent the state. You got to make sure them federal dollars did it. When Robert Byrd was the senior senator for West Virginia, for example, there was a scene where he was dedicating a building. I believe it was for the FBI. It was some archive building. And the story was the FBI didn't even want it, but because he was in West Virginia and he was on the budget committee or whatever, Bob Byrd got in there. And the person that is standing next to him, I wish I could find the clip, but the person basically said, you keep reelecting him and he'll keep building in there. Basically, Bob Byrd was a one-man jobs program for the state of West Virginia, period. And and I'm sure West Virginia is heavily recipient on federal dollars, even though from a resource standpoint, I mean, it's one of the biggest coal reserves in the world. I mean, West Virginia should not be as poor as it is, especially with the resources that it has. But that's West Virginia politics, and I'm not a student of that, but I just can't stand it to hear that people are proclaiming themselves that they're the hero of the people, and yet I'm sure he's had more drinks with more lobbyists than I'll ever have in my lifetime. The other thing that Washington really abhors is just this constant battle between the young versus the old. And again, this is not something new. I mean, Mr. Patel is probably in his early 40s. He says he's only been in government service for 16 years. So assuming, if he went to college, graduated from law school at 25, and then, 16 years from that, it's about early 40s. But, he's obviously served, but not as long. But then again, people forget Hoover was in his, I believe, his late 20s when he was appointed as the director of federal investigation, or was it the BOI, Bureau of Investigations, before it got changed to the FBI. But Hoover was on the bureau for 48 years, so I mean, he went through a giant transformation. But the whole point is that he was a relatively young man, appointed at that time by the Attorney General. But if you kind of look at this picture, this is another story that that kind of goes and tells the story. This is a picture. Now, I believe, I can't tell you exactly when this, I want to assume this picture might have been taken during the Cuban Missile Crisis. But, and this is provided by Alme, so thank you for fair use. But this is a picture of John Kennedy in the Oval Office. And the gentleman on the left-hand side, the Marine Corps Commandant, was a gentleman by the name of General Honor. General Honor had the distinction of being the only head of a service that won the Congressional Medal of Honor. He won it, I believe, in World War II, and he is the only chief of staff, well, in this case, Commandant of Marine Corps, that's his title. Other services are Chief of Staff of the Army, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, and then for the Navy, it's the Chief of Naval Operations. But the gentleman in the middle is General Anderson. And General Anderson was the Chief of Naval Operations. He was graduate of the United States Naval Academy, but he was the CNO, as he is called, the CNO during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And needless to say, all of the chiefs had heartburn. I mean, it is a documented fact that, for example, Curtis LeMay, who was Chief of Staff of the Air Force, had tremendous heartburn with John Kennedy because John Kennedy would not allow the Air Force to go and to bomb Cuba back into the smithereens, because John Kennedy probably accurately deduced that if we were to go and to bomb into Cuba and somehow kill the Russians, that the Russians then in turn would move against us in Berlin, which we could only defend with, I believe it was 1,500 men that we had actually in the city of Berlin. I think we had less than 10 divisions total in West Germany. And since Berlin was approximately 300 miles inland, I mean, there was no way that it could be defended. The only way that the United States could defend West Berlin upon a Soviet attack was to launch either a tactical or launch a massive nuclear strike against the Soviet Union. That was it. End of story. And, when General Anderson was over in the war room over at the Pentagon, and Kennedy was in the situation, at that time it was called the International Situation Room. Now it's just called the Situation Room. But I mean, it had to chafe under this admiral, because also that was in the war room was Robert McNamara. Now, McNamara had served under General Curtis LeMay in the war as an Army officer. Basically, he was a statistician that drafted up all the reports on how well, LeMay's bombing crews were doing. But when McNamara was over there, he was very unfamiliar how the Navy operated. And there's a very famous scene in the movie 13 Days that was based on Bobby Kennedy's recollection of the Cuban Missile Crisis, where Anderson and McNamara just go at it. And basically, Anderson is telling his boss to get the hell out of his war room, and if he's got something important, he'll come in and tell him. Well, after the Cuban Missile Crisis, it got so bad that Kennedy actually appointed Anderson as the U.S. diplomat to Portugal. Now, I don't know if he was of Portuguese descent, but I mean, as a military person, even as retired, you go where your commander-in-chief tells you to go, and he wanted him. But the adage was he just basically got him out of Washington, D.C., because, he had put up such a fuss, I'm sure, and McNamara probably went and said, we got to get this guy out of here. I can't operate like this. So, my whole point is that there is this constant tension, really in all organizations, that you have this young, class coming up, and you see it all the time in business. I mean, I consider myself to be fairly technology savvy, but I'm still trying to learn some aspects of Instagram. I was on Facebook, but I got off of it for a number of different reasons. But I'm trying to grow this channel, and obviously Instagram could be viable in that, but I'm just taking it slow. It's not my life, but you have young people that know the ins and outs of Instagram, but they don't know how to make toast for themselves in the morning. They've got to have someone else make them avocado toast. I mean, that's how bizarre sometimes I think it is that there's just such a dysfunction between the generations or multiple generations. So I just wanted to get this short thing out. I first of all, I want to congratulate again Mr. Patel for being confirmed. I think that he is going to do a fabulous job at the FBI. I think that as the Democrats, I mean, let's face it, you could only do the Stonewall dance for so long, right? I mean, at some point, short if they found something really atrocious, and I'm sure their fact finders were looking for everything. But the bottom line is, they couldn't find anything on him that would derail his. And now Trump has pretty much got his team in place. Now, of course, there's going to be tons of undersecretaries and second, third, and fourth level appointees that are going to have to go through. But I mean, clearly, you got to get the first class, right? You got to get the first string confirmed. And now with Tulsi confirmed, RFK Jr. confirmed, now with Kash confirmed, Pete Hegseth confirmed. I mean, you have this class of young, relatively young, cabinet heads, secretaries, administrators, call them what you will, directors, you name it. I mean, they're the top dog in their organization. And I'm sure that there are plenty of people that are going to chafe under that. Now, there is that saying that with a sense of honor, if you can't play ball with the boss, then you have if you had a sense of honor, you would go and resign. You would just go and say, I'm sorry, I cannot work under these conditions, and resign, and then you become an outsider, and then you do whatever protest you want. That's the honorable thing to do. But I believe, as Trump found out in his first term, is that there are people that were smiling to his face, but wishing to stab him in the back, figuratively. For whatever reason, could they not do it? Would they not do it? Really doesn't make a difference. The fact of the matter is they were not 100% loyal to what his vision was. And as a former military officer and as a junior officer, it was my job that if I got a vision from my wing commander that says, I need to support this, and then it gets translated, and then my commander, who is a full colonel, gentleman by the name of John Griffin, God rest his soul, one of the best colonels I ever worked under in my career. The other one was Bill Jones, who eventually became, I believe, a 2-star general. Bill also died. He's buried in Arlington. Another great man. God rest his soul. But the point is that the directive comes down, okay? You can say the directive, the order, whatever. The boss's vision is this. It's our job to first understand the vision, then to translate that vision on how it affects the units, in this case, security police. What does security police got to do to support the boss's vision? And then once we figure that out, then how do we go and translate that into actionable items so that the wing commander can say, is security police supporting my vision? And that colonel, John Griffin, can say, yes, sir, we are. And be absolutely truthful with it. We're not going and we're not trying to belabor the point. We are going and fully supporting you 100%. Now, if we cannot, then you must resign. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot dissent on the inside. Let me take that. You can raise your objection to the boss, and I've done this even at my level. I would go and say, sir, same thing, Colonel Griffin, sir, with permission, can you take your eagles off and can I take my bars off? And that was my polite way of saying, sir, can we just talk man to man? And he would say, okay, my eagles are off, your bars are off. Tell me what's on your mind. And I would tell him what's on his mind. And at the end he said, is that it? I said, yes, sir. And what are you planning to do? I said, sir, I'm going to carry out what you tell me to do. I just wanted you to understand where I'm coming from. All right, Al? I understand. I'm putting on my eagles back on. You can put on your bars. Yes, sir? Figuratively, right? We're not figuratively taking it off. The adage was, we spoke as men to men. We understood each other. And now we are going to go back to the way we were. And then at that point, he says, okay, I want you to do A, and I want you to do it this way. And no, I can't tell you the reason why, but you got to do it. Yes, sir, I can do that. You're dismissed. Yes, sir. Boom. That's it. I'm out there. I'm going to get the job done. But the great thing about Colonel Griffin is that he respected me as an officer. He respected me because I'm the guy on the ground that's got to get it done and lead his people to be able to do that. And he has to have absolute confidence in me. Now, before I go and I sign off today, there was a rather unfortunate event that happened today. The USS Harry Truman on the 12th was involved in some sort of collision with a merchant ship. I believe it was in the Med, but I can't confirm that. But it was definitely involved in an accident. We just found out today that the commander of that aircraft carrier, who's also typically the commander of a task group. The carrier is the centerpiece of a task group. So he's not just the commanding officer of USS Harry Truman, he is typically also the task group commander. In this case, he was a naval captain, which is the equivalent of an 06. He was not a flag officer. But because his ship sustained damage, not serious damage, but visible damage, he was relieved of command. And evidently they're bringing the commander of now the Eisenhower over to command the Truman, and I'm sure the XO for the Eisenhower then may be promoted in place as the new commanding officer of that aircraft carrier. The whole point is that things happen, okay? And there are consequences. And I think that's something that's lost on the civilian side that is frequently impacted in the military. You hate that things happen. Who knows how it is? There'll be an inquiry, I am sure. But the fact of the matter is that ships that collide with other ships, something went wrong in the chain of command. And as a result of that, that person can no longer serve as the commander of that vessel. That's the way it is. I often wish sometimes that in the civilian world, and especially in the world of politics, what is a senator responsible for? Very little. They vote. I mean, they may run a committee, and that sort of thing, but their job is to vote. There is something that is brought before the Senate. At such point, it needs votes to either get passed or rejected. And your job is to vote how you would either for your own best regard or for your constituents, whatever. Because there have been instances where I'm sure senators have voted against their constituents and they have paid the price for it. They were not reelected the next time that they were eligible. So my whole point is this, is that accountability has got to be everywhere. Accountability has got to be in your own personal life. Accountability has got to be in your job. Accountability has got to be in your faith. And in your life as a whole. And I think that what's going to happen is that it's one thing for people to raise their own hand and say, you know what, I screwed up royally. Okay. It's another thing when someone else is going to have that obligation. And, the adage in the FBI is always, or should always be, you got to go where the facts are. You have no interest, you have no period interest in the end result. That's not your job. Your job is merely to investigate, present the findings of that investigation, typically to the Attorney General. Then the Attorney General makes the command decision. Do we prosecute or don't we? And then that's the job of the Department of Justice. But it's accountability. So the whole thing is that I think some people are going to find out rather quickly that concept of accountability, because if they were not schooled in the school of accountability, they're going to get schooled rapidly. And some people are not going to survive politically as a result of that. But if that's what the facts are showing you, then you go where the facts are. And that's it. Case closed. And you move on to the next case until at some point you say, you know what? It's time for me to go. I've done my time. So once again to Mr. Patel, congratulations, sir, on being confirmed. I hope that your tenureship of the FBI is filled with what the FBI supposedly stands for: fidelity, bravery, and integrity. And I would also say accountability. And that you serve this nation with the same zeal, if not more so, than you portrayed in trying to get confirmed. Now, there's no more excuses, sir. You're in the chair. You have to lead the men and women. And some of them are not happy that you're there. But with all due respect, that's not your problem. That's theirs. And if they cannot, they need to resign. They can resign honorably, or later on, they can be fired, as some agents found out during the last go-around. So, sir, again, congratulations. And I hope the FBI comes back to that luster and that dignity and that affection that certainly some of us had for it. Thank you, sir, and I salute you.